Welcome to the Smokies and Wine podcast with JB and Jamie, with the best guests, wine and chat. You know it makes sense. Sponsored by Clackenview Wealth Management, working with you today to plan for your tomorrow.
Dominik, welcome, Smokies and Wine podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, fellas. Nice to join you guys as well. And it's good to do a hometown flavoured podcast. I've never done one of these yet, so it's great to do one.
Oh, well, I'm sure it'll be the first of many. There's podcast galore going off over here.
in Arbroath especially. You haven't lost your accent too much, mate. Not at all. I see a few I's getting dropped in there.
No, I haven't. It's one of those things where I find, especially if I talk to Scottish people, that my accent gets really broad. When we lived in the wonderful Nova Scotia in Canada, it was our first place we lived, and we lived in a wee town, Mahone Bay. And so my kids were kind of used to hearing, it's probably my natural voice, but it's slightly softened for the radio. And then these two boys from Aberdeen moved into the town, and one of them moved next door to me. And so my kids would hear me talking to him on the doorstep, and then be like, all right, you feel like me, eh? And then it would just lapse right back in it, and it would get completely Doric between the two of us. And my kids would literally say, who were the two guys on the doorstep? And I would just say, oh, it's just me talking to, the next door neighbour. And they would say, you just didn't sound anything like you normally do. So, I find that when I talk to Scottish people still, my accent gets more and more broad. And for some reason, I did a podcast in Ireland last week, and I found my voice got started to take it on an Irish accent. So I don't really know what's happening there with me.
That's your Celtic connection.
You're mimicking them, basically.
Yeah.
Now, we don't want to get off on the wrong foot, but we do have a bone to pick with you early doors. We know it's early in the morning there, but out of all the guests we've had, you have by far picked the worst beverage for us to have to drink.
No, I know. And the thing is that, so my wife works in an offie here. They don't call them offies, they call them liquor stores.
Vicky Wines Canada, basically.
Basically, that's it, yeah. And when I said, and she's really into our wines, and when I said the wine I was picking, she was like, you are kidding. She says, that is the most disgusting wine that we sell. You can't possibly have that. And I said, no, this is what I used to drink at the steeple in Arbroath when I was a kid, and we'd go down there for Hogmanay. And she'd said, oh, so what used to happen at the steeple? I said, there's no way I'm telling you.
Yes. I know we said nothing's off limits, but that is.
So for all our listeners, Dominik has chosen utter pish, and I'll let him explain what it is.
It is what I like to refer to as Arbroath champagne, aka Asti Spumante from Martini. It was the poshest drink that I could ever afford when I was a kid going down to the steeple. And I notice that they have since removed the word spumante from the label. It's now just called Martini Asti. And I read up about it, and apparently it's because it sounded too much like spewing, so they removed the name. That's how it no longer is spumante, because of all these kids throwing it up at the steeple.
No, I thought spew was just like a Scottish word. Is that a multicultural word then, the spewing?
I think maybe they just sold so many in Arbroath for Hogmanay that was enough of a reason. So let's try and get this open. Hope it doesn't go all over the place. But I've no idea. I don't like sweet wines at all, which is weird because in Canada, especially where I am in Alberta, they have these ice wines, which are all the rage. But I'm not into that. So I just remember this tasting like festivity and kisses. So come on.
There we go.
All right.
Nice. Jesus, man. This is going to be history in a glass.
It's okay.
If me and JB start snogging in half an hour, you'll know what
it is. Cheers, Dom. All the best.
Cheers, fellas.
So anyway, on about Arbroath. Oh my God, man.
Oh my God. That's like eating a whole bag of those Haribo sweets that my kids like. Oh, that's
cannot
sweet.
Possibly be bringing back pleasant memories for you, surely.
Maybe that's how we did so much snogging down at the steeple was to take the taste of Asti Spumante out of our mouths and replace it with whatever someone else had been drinking instead. But yeah, so, no, that's
the taste of fat Margaret Fastrathi is better than this.
Almost certainly.
So we call this an acquired taste. Is that what we call it?
Speaking of Arbroath,
yeah,
we seem to be interviewing nothing but JB's neighbours, because you grew up in Kearney, didn't you?
No, Curtin. I was in Curtin. I was on the other side of the ditch.
He's trying to call it the posh bit. He was Kearney,
the higher tier.
No, it was good, and we used to all kind of get together. There was a great wee dip in between where we used to play football. So it was like, every day there's summer holidays, there'd be a bunch of lads from Curtin, a bunch of lads from Kearney, and we'd just kind of sort out teams and play football all day. And there was also the wonderful the Burney jumps that we had set up over the bit of the Brothick Burn that wound its way through there, that you would be jumping from trees to the other side of the bank and vice versa, and swings and everything. It was lots of happy times. And of course, right beside the two as well was the Vix Club, where I spent many happy nights of the family night there as a kid. That was so much fun. Absolutely brilliant. Do you mind Pennies from Heaven?
Pennies from Heaven.
Pennies. Oh, so on the family nights at the Vix Club, right? At one point, so this is when, I'd have been, 9, 10, so this would be late 70s. And the band would play the song, Every Time It Rains, Pennies from Heaven. And basically the kids would go on the dance floor and all the adults would throw coins on like a highs at a wedding. And it was just brilliant. But they had to stop it after about 3 weeks because kids were battering the hell out of each other to try and get these coins. And there was rumours that they were sending buses of kids coming through from Dundee because they heard they could get 50 pence. so it was like full-scale war after a while. And then it was actually banned. But it was it was one of the greatest things in my childhood. It was brilliant.
I just remember the claim to fame of the Vix Club, the Kearney, was George Best was in there, because he did an exhibition.
That's right, I heard that, yes.
But one of the best things was he had Miss World with him as well. Mary Stavin was with him. Because I've got a good friend, Brian Chapman, he played, and he was sitting having a pint with George Best and Miss World.
Oh, if only that had been at Hogmanay, he might have taken her down to the steeple. We might have shared some spumante with her.
I think George Best would have liked a few spumantes, eh?
No half. See, just what you mentioned in the Vix Club, Dom.
Yeah.
Did you? I know they had the family nights. Did you ever go to the ones? It might have just been before your time. I used to go down there when I was young, and they had these sort of, I dare say they would call them open mic nights now, but back then it was just anybody want to come up and do a wee turn, and me and my pals at sort of 8, 9, 10 would go up and basically do the shake and vat adverts and stuff like that. Was that in your time?
Yeah, no, and that was always part of the family nights as well. And my dad Terry was a pub singer at the time, and he used to play in the Central, the National, all those kind of pubs, the Corner Bar, and so he would always get up and sing a bit, and we were in. There was a thing called the Angus Children's Theatre that was run at the Webster Theatre at the time by Anne Craig and Maris Doig, they were called. They were the two people who first set me on the kind of course to entertainment. They were absolutely brilliant. So, and my mum was always keen on us doing stuff, so we would always do a turn at those nights. We'd always get up and like sing a song or tell a few jokes. And between that and it was a really competitive town to grow up in for kids back then, because you had like the talent nights at the Vix Club, you had the pool, but the fancy dress competitions and the Mr. Muscles and all that stuff, we'd enter at the swimming pool. And then you had the festivals every year and that I used to enter in the Arbroath Festival. So it was there was always some kind of arty kind of entertainment competition going on as a kid there for sure.
So you were always arty and acting and singing just from a young age? That's where it all started?
Yeah, that and the football. I played for Ransell as a kid. I don't know if Ransell exists as a boys' club now or not. And that was, who ran that? Graham Duff's dad. Graham Duff was a kid who lived in Glebe Road with us, who was just the best goalkeeper I'd ever seen. Probably the best goalkeeper I'd ever seen in my life. If I ever get asked that question on a football podcast, who's the best keeper you've ever seen? I'll say Graham Duff. And that'll really confuse them. But his dad ran the team, and I loved playing for them. And I was in the Arbroath school team. And then the way my mum tells it is they started a chess team at the same time for Arbroath. I think this must be one of the first chess teams in a school back then. And apparently the headmaster himself, the legendary Harry C. Lyon, he had said, he phoned up my parents and said, the chess team stuff's the same time as the football stuff. And Dominik's one of the few people who plays chess. So could you ask him to go play for the chess team instead of the football team? And so I say that's why I never made it as a footballer, because they forced me to represent Inverbrothic at chess. Chess stole me from football. And the thing is, I don't think I've ever played chess since I was a teenager. So yeah, but it was like entertainment stuff and football. That was what it was growing up then. I'm loving this Astres Primanti, by the way.
See that? I can see that.
Now I'm reading in that last little story that what I think is you're shit at football.
Oh no, I played at Wembley. When one of the great things that I managed to do as a result of Gamesmaster was, I think this would have been about maybe 94, 95, 96. They used to have these celebrity games before the auto windscreens final. And there never used to be that much of a crowd there, maybe 30,000. But this year it was Birmingham City were one of the teams. So it was like 84,000. And I was playing on my team. There was it was me, Chris Evans, Angus Dayton from Have I Got News For You, Stan Boardman, and the other team there was Jim Rosenthal, Todd Carty from EastEnders, and Grange Hill. And I'll never forget that day. I was a left winger. You won't be surprised to hear. And so I remember that day. Two things: John Alford, who was a young lad from London's Burning, he was in that thing.
He was in Grange Hill as well, I think. Actually,
I think he was. So he was leading. He was at the front of the line when we walked out onto the pitch, and he's juggling the ball on the sidelines. And then we get the sign, right, walk on the pitch. 84,000 fans go mental. This boy John Alford juggles the ball all the way right to the centre circle. Keep it up. Does that thing, picks it up, catches it on the back of the neck, everything. I'm like, oh my God, that's so... The best I did was I nutmegged Jim Rosenthal down the wing, and then I flicked it past Todd Carty. And I remember Stan Boardman, who was the worst guy to play football with because he was a greedy bastard. And all he could say was, hey, pass it here. And so I nutmegged Jim Rosenthal. I got past Todd Carty, and I can't remember who it is. Someone came in and tackled me because I just thought I was at the edge of the box. I'm at Wembley. There's no way I'm passing to anyone. And someone came in and just took me out man and ball. I can't remember who it was. And I'm kind of lying there. I open my eyes, and Stan Boardman's leaning over me, calling me all the F and C's you've heard in your life. So that was my Wembley experience. It was a good one.
What would you say your earliest accolade was then? That started you off in this whole thing. You mentioned the swimming pool, the paddling pool and things like that. Were you ever one of the Mr. Muscles or Bonnie Babies or any of that stuff?
Yeah, I was a Mr. Muscles, which is incredible because I had an arm like, it was like twigs. And but I think the first time that I kind of felt an achievement was at the festival. And so I would do like the poetry reciting, and I played classical guitar at the time, so I would do the classical guitar stuff. But I think one year they did impromptu speech making, and I'd never done anything like that before. And I think, if I remember correctly, I think it was an open category, and it was with adults, and I was the only kid doing it, and I won that. And I can't remember what the subject was, but I thought, you know what? I can actually talk pish about anything, and maybe there's some way I can turn that into some kind of career, because obviously I'm not good enough as a footballer. I like singing, but I'm not that good. I like acting, but I'm not that good. But you know what? I can probably talk pish with the best of them. So I think that's definitely where thoughts of being a presenter definitely
That's
started.
an amazing connection, because I've been talking pish for years and I never thought of it as a career.
You left Inver. Did you go right through primary 1 to 7 at Inver and then head over to Strathallan, or how? What?
No, three different schools. I went to Hayeshead. Was my first school, because we lived in Horlodge Hill at the time, right at the top of that hill. Great house. Oh, loved that house. Backed onto the big park, the swings and everything. It was just, loved that house. And we had the best neighbours a kid could have. There were a family called the Milnes, and there was Mr. and Mrs. Milne. She was just like an extra granny, but all her kids. It was like the Bruins in her house. There seemed to be about 20 kids, and they all read comics. And I would go next door, and they'd all let me read their, so it was like the Beano and the Dandy, and then the Victor and all the war comics and everything. So it was the best neighbours I ever had. And then we had the swings out the back. And I remember the swings, because it was the first time I ever split my head open, was at those swings. And a lovely girl called Sally, can't remember her last name, local lass, used to look after us as kids, obviously not that well, because I got my head split open. There was a boy called Mark, and I remember I was running. It was one of my earliest memories, must be about 3 years old, running hypnotised to the swings, and it just came back, took me clean off, and split my head open. So it was Hayeshead, and then I went to Lady Lone, because we moved up to Kirkton and there wasn't enough room at Inverbrothick, so I had to get the bus down to Lady Lone, but it was okay because my granny Diamond lived near that school, and so that was good. And then Inverbrothick from about primary 4, I think that would have been. But Inverbrothick was brilliant. It was just that building was just so beautiful. That great old school building that they had was absolutely fantastic.
Now, did you go to the high school?
I never went to the high school. I'd gone to Strathallan School by that time. I was getting into a wee bit of kind of low grade trouble, because I was finishing my work before other people in the class, so I started to muck around a bit, and I started doing a couple of naughty things for like a 9-year-old. That thing where you get the dog shite, and you put it in the newspaper and you set fire to it. Yes, and you put it on the doorstep and they come and try and stamp out the fire. So I was up to all that stuff, and my mum was like, "Oh, this isn't going to end well." So she took the really brave step of getting me to take a scholarship exam for this posh school just outside Perth, Strathallan, and so I got a scholarship to there and went there from the age of 10. And it was a very, very privileged education that I had there. It was brilliant teachers, and we never paid for half of it, which was great. So no, that was good. I was very lucky. So no, I never got to go to the high school or the academy or anything like that.
My father was at Strathallan.
Oh, really?
He was. So my mum was always keep saying, "You need to ask him about Strathallan," but yeah.
Oh, it was
obviously like 40 years before you were there, but
yeah, no, it was lovely, and what it was that, and I look at education now, and especially when it comes to sports, and how teachers aren't available to teach kids sports in the way that they used to be. And that was what was brilliant was going to a place where the teachers stayed in the school as well. They were always available for any extra sessions that you wanted coaching with, whether it was rugby or cricket or anything like that. The sporting side was absolutely first class. It was really good.
Was Strathallan live in then? Did you have to live in at Strathallan?
So from the age of 10, that was me. Well, actually, I think I would have been 10 years old. Yeah, I had to leave home and kind of stay in a dormitory, and with guys from like Bahrain and places like that, and super rich parents. So that took a couple of years to get used to. I was really, really homesick. There was a couple of guys there, especially in the first couple of years, who would take the piss at you because you were the token poor kid on the scholarship, and so it made me kind of want to try hard to kind of, to beat them, be as good as them. Yeah. And I think that's how it kind of it fostered a work ethic in me that is kind of how I managed to have a career, really, because there's a lot of funny people doing TV and radio, and there's a lot of clever people doing TV and radio. So the trick is that if you're not quite as funny or not quite as clever or not quite as cool or good looking as them, you got to work twice as hard as them. And then that's definitely where it started.
And from Strathallan straight on to Bristol, was it?
Took a year off. Yeah. So I really wanted to go to Oxford University, because again, I was so competitive by that point. It's like, that's the top of the league. That's the Champions League. I want to go there. Sorry if you can hear beeping, by the way. Some guys building a house opposite and some big vans just turned up. Anyway, so just to let you know that I live in a real street. I don't live in some posh place. I live in a place with vans turning up, even in Canada.
So the castle across the road's getting renovated, is it?
It's a semi. And so I was like, I was going to go to Oxford University. When I was doing my A-levels, I applied and I went down for the interview thinking I was the absolute dog's bollocks and I was the cleverest kid in the world. And I got the plot of King Lear wrong during my interview. And not only that, but then I proceeded as a 16-year-old to try and tell this 70-year-old Oxford professor that no, he was the one that had the plot wrong, that I was in fact correct. So obviously I didn't get in there. And then I was stupid and arrogant enough to think that if I took a year off and applied again, I would get in. And so I spent a year in Milton Keynes, which is where my mum and dad had moved down to by that stage. And I worked for a building company. So I just kept working harder and harder, and I kept climbing up and up. And I found myself at the end of that year, I was purchasing manager on a contract for the United States Air Force, building houses for them in Bicester and in Clay Hill in Surrey. And I was only 19.
Within a year?
Within a year, yeah. No, it was just one of those weird things. It was the right job at the right time. I really, really loved it. And so by that point, I'd failed again to get into Oxford. I had a place at Bristol University and I nearly turned it down because they offered me the same job in Germany, build a purchasing manager for the US air bases out there. So I might have ended up, working. I might have been working in the building industry.
So Bristol, though, yeah, pretty cool.
That was
it was quite the hotbed of comedy talent and everything, yeah.
A couple of things were great about it. It's a beautiful city. It's a brilliant city, full of atmosphere and history. And there was a lot going on at that time. There was a great burst of music happening there. Bands like Massive Attack and everything, and coming up. So there was definitely, you felt there was something in the water. And I was lucky enough to just be part of an amazing group of people at that time who did drama. And there was Simon Pegg and David Walliams, Jason Bradbury, who went on to present the Gadget Show, Mavamwe Moore, who became head of BBC Comedy. She produced Little Britain. And so when I started off doing stand-up there, I was the first one to do stand-up, and these guys were obviously funny as well. So I'd said to them, look, I want to start my own comedy night. And if you guys, because I'd seen Simon do bits and pieces at student things, by this point I knew he was a genius. So so we had the thing that ran for a few months, David Icke and the Orphans of Jesus. And that was great. That was brilliant. So that was the first kind of stand-up debuts of Simon and David and people like that, and they obviously went on to do pretty well for themselves. So it was a great time. It was a good time to be there. Good people.
Well, I heard David Icke, he's not such a good goalkeeper as Graham Duff, I don't think.
No, he's not.
How did it feel doing the stand-up then? Because that was what you really sort of wanted to do at the start, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was. It's weird. It kind of goes in two stages. I started off just doing stuff for my fellow students, and that was pretty easy. But then this talent agent came to Bristol, and he represented Frank Skinner, Phil Jupitus, people like that, Henry Normal, and he did a comedy workshop, and I went along and I did my little 10 minutes, and so he's like, listen, do you want to come and do some gigs supporting Frank and Phil? And I was like, yeah. So I was only like 19 at the time. And so all of a sudden I found myself in these really rough working men's pubs in Birmingham, tiny wee round glasses, fresh-faced. And I decided, because I was now doing comedy in front of grown-ups, I had to do grown-up comedy. So I had to do political comedy. Before that, my act was basically, most of my act was about the how terrifying it was to try and buy a packet of condoms in Boots in Arbroath when everybody knows you. So that was basically my thing that I used to do.
It's still as bad.
It's just still bad. And do you know what's bad about it now? When I happen to glance at the aisles, it's so much more complicated now, isn't it? Like back in those days, there was just there was Durex and then Durex Extra Strength. Now, there's creams and lubes and squirty things, and it's unbelievable. I get confused. I keep thinking it's like the Easter eggs on sale when I go in. But I decided that I would do political comedy, and because I was very militantly left wing and still am, so I would literally bound onto the stage as a 19-year-old. Hands up, who hates Maggie Thatcher? And there'd be these like kind of welders and that in the audience. And they would say, "Shut your fucking mouth, you spicky twat." And so I absolutely died a death. And I remember once, and it was Frank Skinner. And even though he wasn't on the telly yet, but he was a very established comedian. And I remember sitting in the back of the pub having died on my arse, and I was nearly in tears. And I'd never been so depressed in my life. And Frank comes up, and I'm like, "Oh, here's Frank. He's going to be like the big brother to me, and he'll sort me out." And he's like, "Hey, you were fucking shit, weren't you?" You know that way he smiles when he speaks, and I was just like, "Oh, Frank, no." And he said, "And I'll tell you why you were." And he sat down and he dissected my act.
Because he's really clever, Frank, isn't he?
He was so clever. He really was, John. He was such a help. And he was like, "First thing, if you want to do comedy about what you know." He said, "Forget if you know nothing about politics. You're only 19. Go on." So I was on a couple of nights later, and I went back to the condom stuff and threw in some other stuff, and that went.
It's all
went
wanking then, isn't it? It has to be just wanking.
Exactly, basically, and that actually, a little did I know that formed the basis of Gamesmaster, of all the jokes on Gamesmaster, and so that was it. But I was lucky in that. By the time I got Gamesmaster, which was just after I left university, I knew by that stage that stand-up comedy was way too hard. I was trying to do it in clubs in London at that point in the Comedy Store, and it's just, I was too young. I didn't know my craft well enough, and it's the most horrible, lonely job if it doesn't go well, because you just feel there's a whole room of people who absolutely hate your guts. And if I wanted that, I'd go to the Calgary Rangers Supporters Club, you know.
But you were on some gigs with like Steve Coogan and people like that, so you were almost some really high caliber, acts.
Yeah, Steve Coogan, and that was the Buzz Club in Nottingham.
That's right.
And again, that was another terrible night. Guy before me, guy called Richard Morton, I think. He did some TV. He used to do comedy songs. As soon as he got up on stage, some guy went up and ripped the guitar out of his hand. That was just the Buzz Club in Nottingham was run by a guy called Malcolm Hardy, who was a legendary comedian at the time. I think he's dead now, and he was very much one of those compeers who just begs people to have a go at him. He really wants you to heckle, and but it was a rough club. It was like a gladiatorial arena. So I just realised that no, it wasn't. I wasn't cut out for that. And then luckily enough, I realised that TV presenting was so much easier, 100 times easier than stand-up comedy. And luckily, I kind of fell into that.
How did you fall into the Gamesmaster? What was the process there?
I just, again, it was through failing. Lots of my best successes in life have come as a result of failing at something else first. So they had open auditions for a show called The Word, which I think was my favourite TV show at the time, and was a late night show that had it was like chat show and musical guests and crazy stunts. It was just total anarchy. You never knew what was going to happen next. Such an exciting show, and they held open auditions. It was like they had 18,000 people applying, and I got to the final 12 of that, and just didn't quite make it. I remember everybody looking so cool in that room, and it was terrifying. There was just me, this dweeby guy, and so I think I just didn't look the part, and so I was absolutely gutted. And that was it. I was like, okay, I'm giving up everything. That's it. I'm giving up stand-up. I'm giving up TV dreams. I was working as a security guard in for the Abbey National in Milton Keynes, which I have to say actually is a good job because I was an overnight security guard, so I just had to sit in front of those cameras and I just read books. And then, do you know what? As jobs go, it's not a bad job. I'd like that. I'd like to retire into that kind of job. So, but then I got a call from these guys saying, "Oh, listen, we're doing this show about video games. Would like you to audition." We spoke to people from The Word. Someone recommended you, so I went down to this church in East London. made some knob gags, and they really liked them, and so that was so that was it. And then I got Gamesmaster, so it really was it was unbelievably lucky. It really was.
Speaking of knobs, was it Terry Christian that beat you to the punch?
No, he was already on the show. Actually, I think it was Katie Puckrick. The girl with the long red hair, she was the one that got it in the end, actually, when I didn't. So, yeah, not Terry. I crossed paths with Terry quite a bit in the 90s. He's all right because I would slag the shit out of him as much as the next guy. But then I met him a few times and he's a good guy. And these days, he's kind of morphed into this kind of, he's quite a serious left-wing political commentator. He really is. He's really politically active these days.
On Twitter and everything, yeah,
that's
exactly.
Right. Yeah, he is.
He came across in the world as an absolute dunderhead. He was just a numpty.
I know, yes, he was.
Gamesmaster then, how much fun did you, and I don't expect you to sort of spill every secret because obviously we'll come on to the book, but how much fun did you actually have on the Gamesmaster stuff?
Well, I think if you imagine when you were in your early 20s, the things that you kind of loved was having a bevy, hanging out with attractive women or men, 2021, it's all good. Playing video games, going to the football, going to sport. And I just basically, I did all that. And I had that every day was either, it was a movie premiere or a video game launch party or going to a football match or going to the boxing in Manchester or whatever. I saw so many great boxers at that time, and kind of hanging out with kind of rock stars and footballers. And it was, it was amazing. It's just a shame that I don't remember all of it now because I really did party hard. And also because I turned into a bit of a dick. I think it's difficult not to. I think to get that level of fame and money so young, I think it's really difficult to handle it anyway. But it really did. It sent me kind of quite mad, and I wasn't a great person then. I made a lot of silly decisions. I had a lot of fun, but it's not quite a path I would go down again. If I would certainly drink less. It's funny. I was talking to Richard Herring about this the other day, and because Lee and Herring came up at the same time, and he was saying that he never did the party side. He wasn't a big drinker. He wasn't a big partier, and so he actually feels that he didn't enjoy it either because he feels he missed out. He feels he went the opposite. So I think the middle ground would have been a good one, to kind of go to. But I was just like,
I know which one I would choose.
Yeah, I know.
Between being a boring twat and getting off your head, I know which one I'd choose.
But it was just that ridiculous thing where, you just felt that your money would last forever. So if I was going out, if a new restaurant in London opened, it wasn't enough just for me to go along. I'd invite like 10 of my pals and pay the whole bill and all that stuff. And you kind of think it never ends. And then you have kids and you realise they're more expensive than any of that stuff. And you wish you'd saved some of that party money from the 20s for everything that they need,
Just on the party scene and things like that, did you? It's obviously a big drinking culture back then, but there was also a fairly big drug culture. Whether you were involved in that or not, you must get offered it all the time.
Yes, and my mother always told me it was rude to refuse gifts. I got seriously waylaid by that cocaine in particular, and that absolutely that nearly killed me, and that really screwed up my life. That was a terrible thing. It's people talk about. There's this kind of myth that drugs kind of make you creative, and there's something that's really cool and artistic about it. And people say like, "Oh, the Beatles wouldn't have written what they did if they weren't on LSD." And like marijuana makes you more creative. The only side effect of cocaine is it makes you want more cocaine. I mean, it's horrible. It's like nicotine in that way. It's just the most horrible drug. It makes you feel that you're completely indestructible, and that's never a good thing. Yeah, it's but we were all on it. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere without it being there. You'd go. I had a pal at the time who would never buy any, and he would just go into the toilets wherever we were in London, and he would just run his finger on the cistern and just take that. And it's like, oh my God, You know, there was just so much. I think there was a thing that like 96% of banknotes in circulation in London at the time, £20 banknotes, had traces of cocaine there. I won't name names, but you know, this times there was a very famous rock star at the time would call me into the toilets of this great bar I used to go to in Notting Hill, and he would have effectively a crisp bag just full of it and a straw coming out. So I think even if I'd wanted to resist it, it would have been really hard. But it caused a lot of problems at the time, and it certainly caused a lot of problems in later life. It was something that I fought very hard to give up and relapsed a few times, and it had severe repercussions on my mental health. And thankfully, that's well in the rear view mirror. That's one thing that I left on the shores of the UK well behind when I went to Canada. No, it's not something. If anyone thinks, you know, is sitting there going, you know what I'm going to do? You know what I'm going to do tonight? I'm going to sit down with that Smokies and Wine podcast and do cocaine for the first time. I hope this stops you. I don't know how many of your listeners that represents, but if you're ever thinking, don't. Just
the hosts.
It's just,
they're all just doing bottles of Asti.
Yeah, stick to the Asti. That's it, kids.
Now, before we move to Canada, I just want to touch on the Gamesmaster, because you had a bit of a falling out on Series 3, I think it was. And Dexter obviously stepped in, but was it not something to do with McDonald's?
Yeah, it's interesting, JB, because there's so much of this book, Gamesmaster, the oral history, that so many things that we've revisited, like things we thought was what happened, or certainly things that I thought was the way it happened at the time. But what's great about this book is the editor tracked down everybody who worked on the show, producers, directors, researchers, runners, contestants who came on, celebrity guests, everyone, for their recollections. And the boss of Gamesmaster, Jane Hewland, who came up with the idea, has a very different recollection of events of why I left for Series 3. It wasn't just McDonald's, and that made me go, oh, hang on. And there was a lot of other stuff at that time going on. There was lots of battles between me and Channel 4 and me and Hewland International. The show had become such a money-making machine that I think everybody, the three parties, the production company, Channel 4 and me, or specifically my agent, all got a bit greedy and all wanted their part of the pie. It's interesting, very similar things happening with the book just now, because the book's just been so much more successful than we thought. So I hope the publisher doesn't listen to this. I'm only kidding, Darren. So there was a lot of that as well. And I had started to go mad with the success of it. So I was making silly decisions based on kind of being unbelievably arrogant at the time. And I wish I'd handled that better. I mean, that could have been it. The viewing figures for Series 3 were not good. The show was critically panned, and Channel 4 were about to cancel the whole thing. You know, I tried to get other things off the ground in that year that they had failed. So, the show and me, that might have been it for all of us. But luckily, they got me back. Channel 4 were like, all right, if you can get Dominik back, we'll give you one more chance. So I came back and we got it right. We got it back on the rails. And you never really get that chance with a TV show. So I was very lucky that we did.
And you got 6-7 years out of it, yeah?
Yeah, seven series in the end. And we weren't even supposed to do 7. That was what was quite bizarre. It's a very strange, unique show in that we did season 6, and I was moving off to Channel 5 at the time. I was one of their launch presenters. I did a late night sports show, Live and Dangerous. So I was like, Series 6 we felt was just brilliant. We got it all right. We were so happy with it. Everybody was moving on, and we were like, that's it. That's the last series we're doing. Brilliant. And what is almost unbelievable, Channel 4 literally did not open the email. And so, like 6 months later, they call up the production company saying, where's your publicity material for Series 7? And they said, well, we're not doing a Series 7. And I'm like, what do you mean you're not doing a Series 7? We've got it in the schedules. So basically there was a whole load of phone calls that had to be made, And that's why the last series was only 10 episodes rather than 18 or 22 or 24, because we had to postpone it. We said, well, there's no way we can get anything together, because it was like 6 weeks before they planned to air it. Luckily, as I did often in my career, I had fallen out with Channel 5 by this point. I was hating that job. I was about ready to tell them to shove it up their arse. And then I got this phone call. Listen, I'm really sorry, Dominik, but is there any chance you could come back and do another series? I was like, just tell me the time and the place. Hi, Channel 5, up your arse. That was basically it. So then we went and got that 7 series, which was so much fun. It really was. We were just so relaxed, and it was like a kind of stag night in a lot of ways. It was like a bunch of guys, friends getting together and having one last hurrah. So that was a lot of fun.
And from your perspective, because I need to go back to it because I've not got it out of my head yet, what was the thing with McDonald's?
Well, I was politically opposed to them at the time. My wee brother Michael, who many people in Arbroath will remember fondly for the numerous appearances in Panto and that at the Webster Theatre, bless him. He was a militant teenage political agitprop revolutionary on the streets of Milton Keynes by this stage. And so he had found out all the stuff that McDonald's were doing about the deforestation they were carrying out in South America. So he started doing an anti-McDonald's leaflet campaign in Milton Keynes. Like, he was about 12, right? 14 anyway. So I was like, I started reading up on it, and I was like, do you know what? You're absolutely right, Michael. And then so when they said McDonald's was sponsoring it, I was like, no, I can't do that. My brother sends out leaflets about them. I mean, sponsorship of TV shows and sponsorship of stuff is always a bit dodgy anyway. Like, I don't like, even with I don't like betting companies sponsoring football teams. I think that's just a minefield. Gambling is one of the few things that I've not been able to kick over the years. And it's so, you just don't need more advertising for it. So yeah, sponsorship is a difficult thing. I'm not a fan of it. I know sadly it's a necessity now. So then that was one of the things when they phoned me up, asked me to come back, as well as an extra zero on the check. There was, I said, well, we can't have any McDonald's sponsorship. And they said, well, hang on, they signed a 2-year deal. It's still got to run. There's nothing we can do about it. McDonald's will sue us if you want to go to court against McDonald's, Dominik. Fair enough. And I'm like, yeah, no, probably. So we let it run for that Series 4, and then that was it. We never had a sponsor again.
Now, you had Robbie Williams as your forward in this group. Now, he was on with Take That, wasn't he? He's quite chuffed about it, isn't he?
He's such a lovely guy. I tell you, he he was on Series 2 with Take That, playing Super Bomberman. And they were, they were all nice guys, but you could tell Robbie was really into it. He was a fan of the show anyway. So he won the golden joystick, and he was the one I got on the best with on the day. And I kept bumping into Robbie over the course of the 90s in some great situations. There's one
we've already spoken about your drug habit, so there's the connection.
Well, there's a wee tease of one of the stories in the book that's told at length, and all I will say is it was the first ever tea in the park. It was the after show. It involves me and Robbie and Noel Gallagher, and one of the most embarrassing failures of my life. So I kept bumping into Robbie randomly, but I haven't obviously seen him for years. And so we were trying to think who to get to do the forward. And we were like, okay, so we want someone who was a guest on the show. We want someone who sums up the 90s. And we want someone who's still big today. And there was really our two kind of ones that we were really hoping for was either Robbie or Zoe Ball. Tried Robbie first and just literally wrote a note to his agent, said, could you pass this on? And it was like, hey, Robbie, I don't know if you remember me, Dominik Diamond from the 90s. We're doing this book. We'd love you to write your forward. So no word of a lie. 3 days later, in my email box, there's an email from Rob W. I'm like, I don't know, a Rob W. And I click it, and it's Robbie Williams. And he's not only written the foreword, and it's brilliant, and he really loves the show. And the golden joystick has been in every house displayed that he's ever lived in. But he also said to me, he's like, so how you been since the 90s? He's like, I can't believe we both survived it. He said, I've kicked all that stuff now. I don't drink or anything like that. I'm in Los Angeles. I think I'm going to start gardening. Now, I love gardening. It's one of the things I've really taken up in Canada because we first of all had a wee farm in Nova Scotia. And so I'm like, oh, well, Robbie, here's what, if you want to start gardening, it's great. So I spent a week swapping emails from me in Calgary and Robbie Williams in Los Angeles about horse manure and how important it was for his vegetables. So that was lovely. There's been so many great things that have happened in the last 6 months, because of the book. And that was just that was a lovely little kind of byproduct of it.
Who kicked the idea of the book off then? Was it you or was it someone else?
No, it was a wee guy called Jack Templeton, who started off as the original Gamesmaster superfan back in the day. He was the first guy to run a website dedicated to it. And just, the wee shit never stopped hassling me over the years. And eventually at some point we became friends, and he's a lovely guy. So he wanted to mark the 30th anniversary, which is January 2022. He wanted to mark it in some way. So he said, why don't we try and do a version of it on YouTube or Twitch or something? And we couldn't because we don't have the rights. So he said, look, why don't I see if there's a market for the book? So it was his idea to get in touch with everyone. And he said, if there's enough memories there, will you thread them all and tell your story? And he did an absolutely incredible job. He really did. And so it's already down to him. He did a great job.
Fantastic. And it's became, I think you mentioned on something that it's one of the fastest filled Kickstarter.
Yeah, I said it's the fastest funded book in the history of Kickstarter, and the publisher shat his pants when I said that. And he said, oh, you can't say that. You can't say that because I don't know if it is. I know it's one of the... And I said, have you learnt nothing from Donald Trump? Just say it. Just say it. By the time someone works out it's not true, no one can remember. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, it's the most successful book in the history of Kickstarter.
Well, that's good, because you're on the most widely listened podcast globally.
That's it. So we got we kind of had a 28-day funding campaign, and we managed to fund it in 1 day and 4 minutes, which was great because it allowed us to then come out with all these things. Like what's great, I've never done a Kickstarter thing before. That what's good about it is that you sell different versions of the book. I mean, it's a nice book to begin with. It's like, it's a posh book, it's like, it's hardback. It's like got metallic lettering and kind of posh. I don't understand the stuff, but the publisher tells me multiple paper stocks, whatever that is. It's printed in Italy, I think, which is like, oh, nice. So yeah, so it's really nice anyway, and lots of photos from behind the scenes that people haven't seen before. But you can offer different versions. So there's a thing like the Poet Master, which you pay a bit more, and I will handwrite a limerick about you and the show in the front pages. There's other ones which you get a Zoom call Q&A for people who aren't lucky enough to have podcasts like yourself. That's a nice way of getting it on the cheap, eh? Fly bastards, aren't you? So
we're waiting on the limerick.
So that's what's good about having managed to kind of fund the basic book so quickly, that we're able to kind of keep coming up with ideas, like that. Like we did one today, which we just launched today, called the Consultation Zone, and that was part of the show where people would ask Patrick Moore, the Gamesmaster, questions about games. We're doing a version of that in the book. So basically you get your name and your question, and I answer it in the style of the Gamesmaster. So we released that today. We said we had room for 12 of them, and it's going to be in a nice little spread like the Gamesmaster magazine. And they went within an hour, all those 12, boom, like that. So we've got, the campaign runs till the 22nd of April. So we'll have a couple more surprises up our sleeves of wee exclusive versions of the book, I think.
And for those that want to get involved in it, how do they still get involved then? Where do they go? How do they find it? Can we put something out for you?
It's literally, if you Google Gamesmaster Kickstarter, that's it. It'll come up, I mean, on my Twitter, I've got a link to it on my Twitter, which is Dominik Diamond and that. But yeah, just Google Kickstarter Gamesmaster and you'll find that easily enough.
You mentioned Patrick Moore there again, and the chaos of Gamesmaster. How did he fit into all this with everything that was going on? Because he seems an upstanding sort of gentleman, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, he did all this stuff at like different times. He was never on the main set. Like, after all that stuff had been done, he'd literally pop in for like a day and he'd have his bits written for him, and he would just knock them all off, and they would go for a curry. That was his thing. One of his stipulations. They had to take him for a curry for lunch. He loved his curry, Patrick, bless him. So he'd read this stuff out that he didn't really understand, but he had such wonderful comic timing that he just nailed it perfectly every time. So he'd do that for 4 hours, go for a chicken tikka masala, come back, do that for another 4 hours, put his coat on and go back to Uranus, basically. And so I never met him at all. I certainly never saw him at the same parties as me and Noel Gallagher, which would have been fun. So I never met him until literally the last day of filming, and I'm really glad I did. It was completely accidental. It wasn't planned. He just happened to be walking out as I was going in to do some voiceover, and so I had a wee chat with him about cricket, of all things. I've always liked the cricket, and he was on his way to Lords, I think, after it for something. So yeah, we talk about cricket, and then that was it. That was my one and only time I met him, which is weird because I think, again, doing this book and the other great thing about the Kickstarter has been hearing from people who love the show, and that's really blown me away. 30 years is a long time to remember something, and it's amazing how many of them, many people, we're a double act, and I never knew it. We're a TV double act, and it's weird thinking like that because I only met the person once. So it's I'm glad I met him.
And then you went into radio. How did that all happen? Was that just a natural progression?
Yeah, I kind of did the two things concurrently. No, simultaneously. That's a better one. Let's use the proper word, Dominik, for God's sake. That posh education in Strathallan, my mum will be shaking her head. Yes, I did the two simultaneously. After series 2 of Gamesmaster, I started working on BBC Radio 5 Live, doing a sports phone in there. That ran for about 10 years. Again, that's just, it's just another of those ridiculously lucky things. I used to get letters from people. Oh, I'm doing a media degree, and how do I break into radio? It's my dream. How did you do it? And I said, well, I just started off in telly and worked my way down. So again, and it's just really lucky that if your first ever job in radio, and it's the BBC, So that was amazing. Certainly a lot more fun than commercial radio is. That's always a struggle. Even when I've done stuff that has been a lot of fun. XFM Scotland was the only thing I think I've ever done in my life that I would put on a par with Gamesmaster in terms of like how good it was and how much I enjoyed it. But it's such a relentless battle with corporate suits all the time, and talk less, play more of the same 10 shite songs every station's playing, and and so I did that when I came to Canada. I didn't plan on working. I was planning on retiring with this wee farm, but we just ran out of money in the first year, and so I started again literally from the very bottom as a complete unknown in radio on a tiny station called CKBW in Bridgewater, Nova Scotia, and was very lucky that worked hard. Managed to climb my way up to doing breakfast shows in Toronto, in Calgary, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. And but it's hard work. You're always fighting against the horrible forces of commercialism. And so I stopped that a couple of years ago. I realised that I had my first kid in 1998, and to just keep going at any level of the media takes so much work that I neglected the kind of things I should have done as a dad for my kids. And that was one of the reasons for coming over to Canada, was to say, right, I'm going to focus more on my kids, because I'd managed to have 3 of them by that point. And so the first year when we ran out of money was brilliant, because I didn't work. All I did for a year was swim about in rivers and walk trails with my kids, and it was just the best year of my life. But unfortunately, no, you don't get paid for that. So I had to start again. And sadly, as a result, you fall into the same trap. You have to work especially as a foreigner, because it's quite a struggle to get, radio work when you've got a different accent. I don't know how many Canadian radio people that are on air in the UK just now, but I was the first Scottish guy to do it over here. And I was very lucky that I had enough visionary bosses. And I was at a time initially when they were looking to make radio a bit different. And then, unfortunately, like in the UK, it all started getting networked from the big cities, cutbacks, everything like that. So I saw the writing was on the wall. And again, I'd missed another 8-9 years of my kids' lives. So this time, it's like third time lucky. You know, I loved writing the book. I loved it so much. I started writing another book, a novel based on the crazy life that I had in Nova Scotia. So hopefully the Gamesmaster book will tide me over till I can get that one published, and then I'd love nothing more than to just be able to sit in my house and write with my wee bottle of Asti Spumante. I
can't believe we're on the third glass of it.
and be there for my kids. You know, finally, my youngest kid's like 15. It's like about time, Dad. You know, but yeah, a quieter life definitely now. Hopefully,
I used to work with a few Canadians in Hong Kong. Now, are Canadians really nice, or is that just a myth?
They really are. You know, they really are. They are the nicest, loveliest people in the world, and it's an incredible country. It's so tolerant. It's so liberal. It's I don't want to go too far down the whole sectarian topic, but I remember the first time on radio in Toronto when I happened to mention a funny story, blah, 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 and I was coming out of Mass, and I was like, oh no, you've said you go to Mass. The phone lines are going to light up. It's going to be hate mail. And I'm like, oh, you're not in Glasgow anymore. Oh, so you realise no one cares. It's okay. It's brilliant. But it kind of goes both ways in that I love them to bits, the Canadians, but I've followed two football teams over here, Toronto FC and my local team now, Calgary Cavalry. They're the worst football supporters in the world, Canadians, because they're just too polite. They're pathetic. They really don't. And luckily, both those teams have got a massive contingent of UK expat fans. It's basically UK expat fans and South American expats. So they're the ones that bring the pyro and the drums and all that and the swearing. And it's so funny. It's the only time I've ever really appreciated boisterous, noisy English football hooligan fans is because you're sitting there half asleep in Canada and one of them will pipe up with, the referee's a wanker, and you're like, oh yes, this is what it's like.
Are they allowed to drink in stadiums over there, Dom?
Yes. Oh yeah, it's amazing. Again, this is what's so kind of crazy is that people get absolutely paralytic at football matches here and there's never any trouble. And hockey, probably ice hockey, the most violent sport in the world, a sport where people actually drop gloves and fight, as part of the game. And there's people, mixed fans, sitting together having a drink, and I've never seen so much as one fight at a hockey. It must just be a cultural thing, this different between Canada and the UK. You can't get Cargill's ice cream though, which is a bit of a pain over here. I've looked for that. Best ice cream in the world still. That was actually my, and I have to say that part of my love for Cargill's ice cream, that was actually my first job and in some ways it was the best job I ever had. And Steve Cargill, bless him, gave me this because I needed money. I couldn't get a job anywhere. Because I was 15. So he said, well, do you want to come and help with my accounts, right? Help my accountant. And I'm like, yeah, do maths. So I started that. And then one day he's like, listen, Don, I'm really sorry. I know we got you on to do the accounts, but if you don't think it's like beneath it, do you mind giving the ice cream vans a quick clean? So I was like, no bother, Steve. So I went to start cleaning them and I saw all the fizzy cola bottles now. So I take one, take another and everything. By the end of the week, I was 99% ice cream van cleaner and 1% accountant. It was the best job ever. It was the only job as good as a security guard at Abbey National. It's cleaning ice cream vans and hoovering up all the sweets, which is just absolutely brilliant.
Now, before we wrap up, very quickly, Gamesmaster, who was your favourite guest, would you say? Not just Gamesmaster, maybe anything you were on.
See, that's a good question. Right. Do you know what? Favourite Gamesmaster guest? I'll say Robbie, because he's written the forward for the book. I also love Zoe Ball. They were my two favourites because Zoe Ball got it. She was so much fun. Some people say, especially in 2021, we live in much more evolved times and we're all a bit more woke, is that people will say, I can't believe all the dirty jokes you did with women back in those days. That was really terrible. And I said, no, they were all in on the gag. I would talk to them beforehand and say, now listen, I'm going to be knob gagging my way throughout this interview. Are you okay with that? And Zoe Ball literally said, hey, don't you worry about me, sunshine. And so when Zoe Ball was playing this Full Throttle, it was a motorbike game. And I said to her, have you, this is, been filmed. So have you ever have you ever, do you enjoy riding motorbikes? She says, no, but I like it up the back. And I was just like, oh, that's it. I am not worthy. You have absolutely out-knob-gagged me. So she was great. I've been so lucky that as part of the Canadian radio career, that I worked for a lot of classic rock stations. And so I was fortunate enough to get to interview some of my own kind of big musical heroes. Roger Waters from Pink Floyd was probably my favourite one of all time. He was taking the Wall show on tour himself, and I was told I could get 15 minutes with him on the phone. And so I was like, oh my God, this is like one of my all-time heroes. And it's great. There's a connection to Arbroath here, because the only panto that I ever did in Arbroath, and I can't remember what the pantomime was, but it was the same Christmas that Pink Floyd got to number one with Brick in the Wall, because I remember all the sound guys and lighting guys getting really excited because Pink Floyd's got to number one. And they were always the guys that smell of patchouli oil. And now it is, maybe it wasn't quite patchouli oil, maybe it was something else, but they all seem to like Pink Floyd. So yeah, I was so excited about this, and I spent a whole week preparing for the interview. I had like 7 sheets of A4 preparation and notes, and we had a power cut just before I was due to interview him. And so there's a photograph. There's my producer, my pal Flairboy, literally is holding a torch up. We got the soundboard to work. The lights weren't. He's got a torch on my pages of notes. And the day before, Roger Waters, who's a notoriously cantankerous soul, he walked off an interview with 60 minutes, like this big interview. So I'm like, oh, Dominik, don't fuck it up. 15 minutes and everything. I ended up an hour and 10 minutes with the guy. It was just one of those things. I loved the chat. I'd worked so hard to make the chat interesting. He liked the chat, and it was just my absolute dream. So he's the kind of favourite kind of guest thing ever. Jimmy, see, I'm going to... Jimmy Carr. What's great as well is that when these comedians tour Canada, and they'll always come on your show as a guest. So I probably wouldn't get Jimmy Carr if I was doing a radio show in the UK, but I had Jimmy on the phone when he was doing a gig in Calgary, and he was absolutely brilliant. He was such a funny guy as well. So there's not really a lot of bad guests, to be honest. I think that most people are professional. Most people know that, you're singing, they're all singing for their supper. And so there's not really been anyone that's been really bad, I would say.
We do want to talk about a bad one, to be honest. We need to hear the David Williams story.
Oh, yeah. That's such a shame, guys. We really were the very best of friends at university. Like I say, I gave David his first stand-up thing, and he's a very strange character. And he certainly was. I was in second year. He came along in first year. And he rubbed a lot of people up the wrong way. I found it I found him fascinating because he was a really smart guy and a really funny guy.
When he was rubbing you.
Yeah, but he rubbed me the right way. And so we were both, he loved the history of comedy, so I'd spend hours talking with him. And I actually made an effort saying to people, no, listen, let him come out for a pint with us. He's a good guy. So yeah, we were really close. And I got him, he was a runner on Series 2 of Gamesmaster. I got him that job. And so I always tried to give him a leg up. And then when I did the show on Paramount, Dom and Kirk's Night of Plenty, when he was just starting out with Matt Lucas, they did a thing called Mash and Peas then, and they came on as guests. And Matt Lucas was not a guy I ever particularly liked. He he met David later. We had our gang, our Bristol kind of comedy gang. And it was one of Katie Carmichael, who ended up being in Bread and Coronation Street. Lovely girl, a Liverpool actress. And she was appearing at a play in London with Stephen Berkoff, and we all went to see it. And David introduced me to this guy. Oh, this is this guy, Matt Lucas, I've been doing comedy stuff with. And he's one of those guys, he didn't like the fact that we had our group and he was the outsider. So there was a thing going on. I just got bad vibes from him. And then so that night, what I'm utterly convinced was Matt Lucas is doing, they decided to sabotage the show. And it was just a wee show on a cable channel, but it was live, and it's my livelihood. And they just destroyed it by just arsing about and fucking chucking darts and behaving appallingly. I was really upset. And here's the worst thing, guys, is that you can't hide on live TV. If it was live radio, that's, people can't see you. You could point to people, you can write stuff, but to have it go wrong on live TV is a certain kind of hell. It's like stand-up comedy. It's like dying a death in stand-up comedy. So I've got to try and keep the show on the rails somehow while dealing with this and a betrayal of one of my best friends.
Yeah.
So it was a terrible thing for them to do. I was absolutely furious. And you see me at the end of it running off set, and I had Matt Lucas pinned up against the wall by the throat, and I had my hand back, and I would have killed. I would have put him in the hospital that night. I was so angry, and the security guard dragged me off, and I turned and I just saw David's face, and I knew that he was like, "Oh shit."
So was it Matt that you actually grabbed then? I thought it was David. It was Matt you grabbed.
No, David's too big. always go for the wee guy. Playground rules,
You can take the guy out of Arbroath, eh?
So, and it's a shame. And that, and my mum, bless her, who follows this stuff, says that when he had his autobiography came out, and apparently he was very apologetic about that and said it was a really wrong thing for him to do, which is fair enough. But, my email address, David. Trust me, it's very easy to apologise in a book. I've done a whole one about Gamesmaster where I do nothing but apologise to people. It's easy. You want to apologise? Fucking email me, you shite bag.
Well, we put it out. We'll tag him. We'll try and mend the rift. We'll try and mend the rift for you.
There you go.
Well, hashtag shite bag.
Yeah.
Dominik, this has been brilliant. We don't want to take up too much of your time. We know it's early morning there, and when you're on Spumante, anything could happen. But this has been fantastic for us. It's great to speak to someone that's from our local town as well that's made it. So all the best to you. All the best to the book. And when the new one comes out, maybe we'll get a chance to chat again and help plug that for you as well.
Yeah, and again, it would be good to do it in person. It's such a shame that COVID has kind of, with what COVID's done, I'm desperate to get back to Arbroath. I had a wee thing recently on Twitch that I did when lockdown started, and I reckon 75% of the audience were from Arbroath. The loyalty was brilliant. It descended into just stories about Arbroath, which really confused Canadians, I have to say. and it was brilliant, and it made me just fall in love, with my hometown in a way that I don't think I ever have felt before. So I missed the place. I was lucky enough that I went back. Only time I've ever been back to the UK in 11 years was about 5 years ago for my brother Conrad's second wedding, which thankfully turned out a lot more successful than his first. So I made a point of taking my kids up to Scotland. My two youngest were born in Glasgow, and I took them to Arbroath, all three of them. Even the one that was born in England, I thought, all right, you can come too. And we went to Peppo's and we got fish and chips, and it was just so lovely. We went out the cliffs, and it was so great to be able to share that with my own children, and I hope to do it again at some point. And yeah, so thanks very much, guys. It's I love the place. I'm very lucky. It was a good place to be born. It was a great place to be a kid. It really. The first time I ever entertained people, and it really set me on the path. So thank you very much to the tune.
If you do come back, we'll certainly do a live one then. That's a date.
With a decent wine. I promise I won't make you guys drink Astis.
We'll choose the next one.
but here's to the steeple. Oh yeah, so one fight, right? Find a wee story, okay? And it's about the steeple, because I don't think I haven't told the story before, because I don't get asked for stories about Arbroath a lot.
Never.
So, but this ties in with Astis Humanity, is that so the first year that I took my wee brother Conrad, who people will also remember fondly, and I took him down to the steeple, and it was like, my mum and dad, look after your brother, right? Look after your brother. Of course I will, Britain. Look after your brother. He must have been about 12, 13, something like maybe 13, 14. I think I was about 16. I was definitely 16 for reasons that will become obvious in a minute. So it comes to midnight, right? You're right, Conrad, Astis Humanity gets pop snogging people. And I happened to meet a rather lovely lassie. I won't spare her name, because I know for a fact that she still lives in the town, and she's Facebook friends with probably most people who listen to this podcast. Right, lovely lassie, and I ended up popping down to her flat with her, which was wonderful, and completely forgetting that I'd left my wee brother. And I literally was like lying there. I went, "Oh my God, my brother Conrad!" And I ran from her flat. I ran back. Well, I couldn't find him anywhere, so I had to phone my mum and dad, and they were absolutely raging. And we found shouldn't laugh. We found him lying in a gutter, absolutely paralytically drunk, and so it probably could have ended up really, really horribly that night. So yeah, I think that the minute that I tasted that first sip of Asti Spumante, I remembered that lovely lassie, and I remembered that terrible thing that I did to my brother. So sorry, Conrad. That's why I'm not going to have any more of it today, just in case I end up doing something terrible.
We're now going to have a giveaway prize contest to see who's going to get all this.
And there is nothing we like better on this show than a happy ending, and it doesn't get any happier than that. So, Dominic Diamond, thank you very, very much. It's been our pleasure.
Oh, listen, thanks, JB. Thanks, JB. It's been absolutely brilliant.
You've been listening to the Smokies and Wine podcast, sponsored by Clackenview Wealth Management, working with you today to plan for your tomorrow.